What was the weirdest TV show you remember from the 1980s? Not just odd, but truly wonderfully bizarre. The kind that made you question whether the writers were geniuses, visionaries, or just out of their minds. The decade gave us Jingles, Neon, and Hairspray, but it also gave us television so experimental it defied reason. From animal shapeshifters solving crimes to teenagers melting into sports cars, these shows weren't just entertainment. They were fever dreams beamed straight into your living room. So grab your remote, because tonight we're diving back into the decade that forgot what too weird meant. These are the 10 weirdest TV shows from the 1980s. You can almost smell the static of an old tube TV, can't you? That faint ozone hum before a commercial break. Picture yourself curled on the carpet, a bowl of cereal in hand, waiting for something familiar, and instead, a man turns into a panther. Manimal wasn't satire, it wasn't parody. It was NBC 1983, and someone earnestly said, "Let's make a crime show about a British professor who transforms into animals to fight bad guys." Dr. Jonathan Chase, the debonair protagonist, wasn't bitten by a radioactive hawk or cursed by a witch. He just had the ability, passed down mysteriously from his father, to morph into any creature he pleased. The transformations, crafted by special effects legend Stan Winston, were part thriller, part nightmare fuel. You'd see his hands claw out, his eyes flash, his clothes rip, and then, cut to black. Boom, there's a panther. But when he turned back, his suit was magically untouched. Even as a kid, you knew something was off. Yet, you couldn't look away. Maybe you still remember that intro line, deep and booming. Jonathan Chase, master of the secrets that divide man from animal. Did you believe it, even for a second? Or did you just love the audacity? Now imagine if Tron and Knight Rider had a disco ball baby. That's Ottoman. Same producer, same obsession with glowing technology, but instead of a talking car, we got a hologram superhero who could merge with his creator. Literally merge. Two bodies becoming one pixelated blur of crime-fighting absurdity. You could tell they wanted it to feel futuristic, with neon suits and computer-generated cars that turned 90 degrees without slowing down. Watching it now, you can almost hear the synth hum, as Walter, the mild-mannered programmer, tells his glowing creation to be careful out there, like a dad, sending his kid to battle the mob with math. It's charming, in that way only 1980s optimism could be. A belief that computers would save us, not crash us. Remember those early PCs that whirred and blinked like they had a soul? That's what Ottoman felt like. A fantasy about your machine loving you back. But maybe you wondered, as the credits rolled, what happened when the lights went out. Did Ottoman just vanish? And then came Turbo Teen. Oh, Turbo Teen. You can almost feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating through the screen. If you were there, maybe you remember the promo. He's fast, he's fierce, he's part car. A high schooler fused with his red sports coupe after a lab accident. It sounds dumb because it was. But the weirdest part, he didn't need a key, he needed heat. A hot shower, a warm day, even a slice of pizza could send him stretching and groaning into rubber and chrome, his body contorting in scenes that scarred a generation. Every morph looked like a car crash in slow motion, limbs twisting, face stretching into a grill, eyes glowing like headlights. And to turn back? Just throw ice water on him. The 80s were big on science gone wrong, but this show felt like puberty gone sentient. Yet under all that ridiculousness, there was something honest, a reflection of a decade obsessed with transformation, with machines and flesh becoming one. Maybe that's why you couldn't stop watching. Maybe part of you wanted to see how far it would go, but nothing quite captured that Saturday morning delirium like Rubik, the amazing cube. Picture it, a floating, talking Rubik's Cube with a high-pitched voice found by 3 Latino siblings and powered only when solved. When mixed up, he'd babble nonsense and beg to be reassembled. You remember the sound, somewhere between Alvin the Chipmunk and a fever dream. Every week, this magical toy helped them fight bullies, thieves, and evil magicians, turning them into animals or shrinking them down to mouse size. And the theme song? Sung by Menudo, of course, because why not? Looking back, it's both revolutionary and ridiculous. One of the first American cartoons with a Latino family tied to a global toy craze. You can almost hear that synthesized beat now, can't you? Rubik, the amazing cube. But admit it, if your cube had ever started talking, you'd have thrown it out the window. Then came something that didn't just blur fiction and reality, it aimed a toy gun right at your screen. Captain Power and the soldiers of the future. Kids were supposed to play along, firing light guns at enemies on TV, while the TV fired back. If you hit targets, your toy scored. If the villains hit you, your pilot got ejected. On paper, it was the future. Practice, it was terrifying. Post-apocalyptic soldiers fighting AI overlords, entire cities destroyed, in a tone so grim it felt like you'd accidentally wandered into a war movie. And yet, you had to admit, it looked incredible. Armor glowed, the robots screamed, the world felt heavy and lived in, with a kind of dread that didn't belong in a toy aisle. You didn't know whether to cheer or hide behind the couch. It was the 80s ultimate paradox, selling despair in action figure form. By now you can feel the rhythm of it, the wild ambition, the earnest absurdity, the unfiltered imagination that made 1980s television so unforgettable. These weren't just shows, they were experiments, test flights into what TV could be if you gave dreamers too much caffeine and not enough supervision. They didn't always make sense. They often failed spectacularly, but they burned bright, and if you were there, they burned into you too. Now here's the question. Which one of these shows do you secretly wish would come back? Because deep down, maybe you don't just remember the weirdness, you miss it. You remember that one house on your street, the one that looked normal until you stepped inside and realized every object seemed to have a personality. That's what it felt like watching Pee-wee's Playhouse. A talking chair, a genie in a box, a floor that screamed Mecca Lecca Hi Mecca Hiney Ho. It was less a kid's show and more like someone slipped you into a dream halfway between Sesame Street and Andy Warhol's living room. Paul Rubens's Pee-wee Herman didn't live in a home so much as a living art project. Walls that moved, puppets that whispered, and toys that seemed one sarcastic comment away from rebellion. You can still picture the neon glow, the jittery stop motion, the laughter that sounded like it came from the walls themselves. Every Saturday morning felt like an acid trip disguised as educational TV, where moral lessons about sharing came right before a talking globe started crying about pollution. But that's the magic of it, isn't it? You didn't just watch Pee-wee's Playhouse, you stepped inside it. It was a safe chaos, a world where adults could hide behind absurdity and kids could see imagination as rebellion. When Pee-wee looked straight into the camera and screamed the secret word of the day, you weren't just an audience, you were a co-conspirator. Tell me you didn't yell along. Then came Small Wonder. You might remember this one as the Robot Girl show, but that doesn't quite capture the unsettling charm of it. Vicky, the emotionless android daughter, lived in a suburban closet, plugged into a wall socket at night like a toaster. Her father, an engineer with questionable ethics, built her as a domestic helper but disguised her as his child. The laugh track told you it was funny, the eyes told you it wasn't. Every episode walked this tightrope between family sitcom and uncanny horror. Her mechanical monotone, the way her face barely moved, the awkward pauses when someone accidentally discovered her secret. It was the American dream wired into silicon. A perfect daughter who never aged, never argued, never felt. You probably didn't think of it back then, but now it feels like Black Mirror before anyone knew what that was. If Small Wonder made robots seem too human, Street Hawk made machines feel almost divine. Imagine Knight Rider, but angrier, louder, and somehow faster. The hero, Jesse Mack, was an ex-cop injured on duty who secretly piloted a black motorcycle that could hit 300 miles per hour and launch missiles from its handlebars. You can still hear the roar, that metallic howl that made you sit up and watch the stunt reel. The bike was sleek, futuristic, almost alive, but behind the camera it was a mechanical nightmare. A $1 million machine that broke down constantly. Yet that didn't matter. Every episode promised the same thrill. A man, a helmet, and a weapon disguised as transportation. You didn't tune in for story arcs or dialogue. You tuned in for that perfect slow-motion leap over a burning car. It was pure 1980s escapism. Style over logic. Adrenaline over everything. Then came The Highwayman, where logic wasn't just abandoned, it was driven off a cliff. The show imagined a post-apocalyptic America, where a mysterious trucker named the Highwayman roamed the wastelands in a semi-truck that doubled as a helicopter. Yes, a helicopter. The cab detached and flew away. The plot shifted weekly between crime fighting, time travel, and supernatural curses. Like Mad Max had a one-night stand with the Twilight Zone. The truck's polished chrome gleamed under desert sun, its shadow cutting through dust like a spaceship that never got permission to launch. Watching it, you could almost smell the gasoline, the ozone, the metal baking in heat. It was part Western, part science fiction, and all madness. But somehow, that was the point. The 1980s loved heroes who drove through chaos rather than cleaned it up. And just when you thought television couldn't get stranger, along came a man who wasn't a man at all, Max Headroom. His stutter became his signature, his glitch became his brand. He wasn't born, he was rendered. A computer-generated TV host, part AI, part punk satire, and entirely ahead of his time. Played by Matt Frewer under layers of latex and lighting, Max was sold as the first computer-generated personality, though it was really just an actor pretending to be one. Still, in an age when computers filled rooms and buzzed like angry beehives, that illusion was enough. He mocked TV commercials, newscasters, even the networks that aired him. You remember the sound, his voice skipping, repeating, mocking itself like a broken record. Max, Max, Max. Headroom. He was the mirror no one wanted to look into. Media mocking media. Technology laughing at its own absurdity. Watching him now feels eerie, prophetic, like the future was warning us about itself in 1987 and we just laughed along. If you think about it, that's what ties them all together. the audacity, the willingness to make something no one else would dare. The 1980s didn't care if a premise made sense. It only cared if it made you feel something. Wonder, fear, laughter, confusion, whatever it took to keep you from changing the channel. Each of these shows, in its own way, dared you to imagine differently. They weren't perfect, some were disasters, but they built a world where television didn't just entertain, it experimented, stumbled, and occasionally struck gold in the process. You can almost hear the hum of those old cathode rays again. Maybe a commercial for bubblegum plays in your mind. Maybe you remember sitting cross-legged on the floor, fingers sticky, eyes wide, asking your parents if TV could ever be that weird again. So here's the question. If someone gave you one of those 80s remotes right now, which world would you go back to? Would it be the glowing madness of Audemars, the surreal joy of Pee-wee's Playhouse, or the static-drenched future of Max Headroom? Because no matter what you choose, one thing's certain, television was never braver or weirder than it was back then. You know what's strange about memory? The weirdest things stick. Not the headlines, not the grades, not even the birthdays, but that one Friday night when your living room glowed blue, the TV hummed like a secret, and a man turned into a hawk before your eyes. You might not remember what you had for dinner that day, but you remember that sound, the hiss of static between commercials, the weight of your elbows pressed into the carpet, the feeling that you were watching something the rest of the world wasn't ready for yet. That's the thing about 1980s television. It wasn't just weird for weird's sake. It was fearless, didn't know better, it didn't care. And you didn't question it. You accepted that a shape-shifting professor could fight crime, that a talking cube could solve family drama, and that a teenager could literally melt into his car without anyone calling an ambulance. Back then, you didn't label it camp or experimental, you just called it Friday night. Looking back, it's easy to laugh. The special effects were clumsy, the acting was melodramatic, the writing, let's just say it often read like someone lost a bet. Underneath all that glitter and absurdity, those shows captured something television rarely touches anymore: pure, unapologetic imagination. They were born from a world still unsure where science ended and magic began. Think about it. The 1980s were sitting right on the edge of 2 centuries, the analog world fading, the digital one flickering to life. Home computers were new toys. Arcades were temples. Technology wasn't corporate yet, it was mystical. Every new invention felt like a portal. And so television mirrored that energy, curious, chaotic, sometimes clumsy, but always full of heart. When Audemars premiered, people weren't mocking holograms, they were dreaming of them. When Small Wonder introduced a robot child who could learn emotions, no one rolled their eyes. They wondered if someday their toaster might talk back too. It's funny how the weirdness of those shows reflected their moment in history. America in the 1980s was obsessed with the future, computers, space, science, progress. But that same future was terrifying. Nuclear war loomed. Machines were replacing humans, so what did television do? It turned our fears into bedtime stories. Manimal made mutation look noble. Turbo Teen made science accidents look cool. Max Headroom made artificial intelligence sound charming. These shows were the decade's way of saying, we know the future's coming, but maybe it's not so bad. And yet not all their messages were accidental. Max Headroom wasn't just a glitchy face cracking jokes between Coke commercials. It was a warning, wrapped in neon and irony. In his stuttering, sarcastic voice, you could hear a future version of us, the world of algorithms and ads and endless scrolling. He wasn't a hero, he was a mirror, and the scariest part, we laughed along. We were so hypnotized by the glow of new technology that we didn't realize we were already living in the world he was parodying. That's the brilliance of 1980s weirdness. It was unintentional prophecy. When Small Wonder made us chuckle at a robot girl pretending to be human, we didn't know we were watching the early stages of our own future, one where machines mimic emotion and emotion mimics code. When Captain Power blurred the line between watching and playing, it was the seed of every interactive story, every VR headset, every game stream we take for granted today. Even Rubik, the amazing cube, a floating, babbling toy that only worked when solved, feels eerily symbolic now. Aren't we all trying to make sense of something scrambled, hoping it'll come alive when the colors line up? But here's the truth. These shows weren't meant to last. They were experiments, flashes of electricity in the dark. Some burned out after a few episodes, others limped through a season or two. And yet, decades later, we still talk about them. Why? Because they dared. They took television's most dangerous risk, sincerity. Every weird idea they put on screen came from someone who believed in it. Glenn A. Larson believed that audiences might take a man who turns into a Black Panther seriously. The creators of Turbo Teen believed a story about body horror could be for kids. Paul Rubens believed a man in a gray suit could teach kindness through chaos. That kind of conviction doesn't exist anymore, not because people stopped caring, but because networks stopped allowing it. The 1980s didn't have irony poisoning. No algorithms, no A/B testing, just ideas. Big, bold, unfiltered ideas that sometimes crashed and burned spectacularly. And when they failed loudly. But that's the beauty of it. Every misfire was still a moment of creation. Even the flops, especially the flops, added to the mythology of what television could be. You remember that feeling, don't you? Sitting too close to the TV, your reflection faintly visible in the glass. The way the commercials bled into the show until you couldn't tell where fiction ended and marketing began. The smell of the carpet, the hum of the antenna, the taste of sugar from cereal that promised toys you'd never get. You didn't realize it, but you were part of an experiment too. Those shows shaped how you saw the world, not through lessons, but through curiosity. And maybe that's why nostalgia hits so hard now. Because when you look back at those shows, you're not just remembering them, you're remembering you. The version of yourself that believed the world still had secrets. The version that didn't think everything had to make sense. The one that could sit through 30 minutes of glowing polygons, talking furniture, and shape-shifting millionaires and still call it a good night. See, weirdness in the 1980s wasn't niche, it was mainstream. It wasn't hidden in cult corners of the internet. It aired on primetime. And because of that, it united people. Families sat together, eyes wide, collectively wondering who thought of this? But they stayed, they watched, they let imagination stretch their sense of normal. The thing is, weirdness has a way of aging better than safe ideas. Safe shows fade, weird ones haunt you. You might forget the plots of a dozen sitcoms, but you'll never forget the image of a glowing hologram riding a car through the night, or a talking cube giggling in Spanish, or a man in a trench coat whose eyes flicker before turning into a panther. That's what sticks. The strangeness, the risk, the audacity of someone saying, why not? It's easy now, with hindsight, to mock these shows, to pull them apart, meme them, analyze their absurdity frame by frame. But maybe that's missing the point. They weren't meant to be perfect. They were meant to feel. They were meant to grab your imagination and shake it awake. They were meant to remind you that television wasn't just a mirror, it was a portal. Today, everything's too polished. Stories are safer. Characters are tested by focus groups before they ever breathe on screen. You can sense it, can't you? That absence of risk, that missing spark. The kind of chaos that once gave us Manimal and Max Headroom has been replaced by predictability. But back then, back when the world was humming with static and possibility, TV didn't just show you stories, it dared you to believe in them. And maybe that's why these weird relics still matter. They remind us that imagination doesn't need permission, that even the strangest ideas deserve a chance to be seen, to fail, to live. They're proof that the human mind, when left unsupervised, can create worlds that make no sense, and that's exactly what makes them unforgettable. When you rewatch them now, something strange happens. The laughter isn't ironic anymore. The absurdity feels comforting, because deep down, you realize you've missed this kind of wonder, the kind that doesn't apologize for being ridiculous. You've missed stories that didn't try to fit a brand. You've missed the sincerity of weirdness. If you close your eyes, you can still feel the glow of that era, the hum of electricity in the air, the weight of imagination before everything went digital. Maybe the world seemed smaller then, but the stories felt infinite. They told you that reality could bend if you just believed hard enough. So maybe the real magic of the 1980s wasn't the shows themselves, it was us, the viewers. The dreamers who made sense of nonsense, who found connection in chaos, who believed that even the strangest ideas could matter. Because if you were a kid in that decade, you didn't need perfect storytelling. You needed escape. You needed color in the gray. You needed a reason to stay up past your bedtime and believe that tomorrow could still surprise you. And isn't that what we've lost? The ability to be surprised? To let stories be strange without needing to explain them away? To let wonder be wild? So go back, just for a night. Watch an episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse and let yourself laugh for no reason. Watch Manimal and marvel at how earnestly it tries. Watch Automan and remember when computer graphics didn't have to impress. They just had to sparkle. Because in the end, the weirdest shows from the 1980s weren't really about technology or fantasy. They were about imagination unrestrained. They were about a world that hadn't yet learned to doubt itself. They were about you, wide-eyed, open-hearted, sitting on a carpet in front of a glowing box, believing in everything and nothing at once. So here's my challenge to you. Revisit that weirdness. Reconnect with the part of yourself that didn't need stories to make sense to make them matter. Let yourself feel that wonder again. And when you do, when the static hums and the theme songs echo faintly in your chest, remember this. Once upon a time, TV didn't just reflect the world. It dared to reinvent it. One ridiculous, beautiful, unforgettable show at a time. You can tell when nostalgia hits. You don't just remember, you feel. The air changes, your chest tightens a little. There's a sound, maybe faint and fuzzy, like the beginning of an old VHS tape before the image comes in. And then, just like that, you're back there, cross-legged on the living room floor, a plastic bowl of cereal going soggy beside you, the world outside forgotten. That's the power of the 1980s. Not the politics, not the fashion, but the television, the glowing heartbeat of a decade that didn't know what it couldn't do. The weirdness wasn't accidental. It was the 80s trying to dream its way out of the ordinary. Think about it. The Cold War was humming like a low background noise. Technology was transforming daily life, and TV executives were drunk on possibility. They didn't just greenlight shows, they gambled on them. Every network wanted to catch lightning in a bottle, even if it meant airing a story about a robot girl who lived in a closet or a talking hologram who could drive a car through walls. They weren't making content, they were chasing wonder. And sometimes the only way to reach wonder is to go straight through weird. That's why when you look back at the strangest shows from that era, Manimal, Ottoman, Turbo Teen, Rubik, Captain Power, Pee-wee's Playhouse, Small Wonder, Street Hawk, The Highwayman, and Max Headroom, you're not just looking at failed experiments, looking at blueprints for imagination itself. Each of them was an artifact from a time when television was both ambitious and naive enough to try anything. The 1980s had no safety net. No algorithms told producers what worked. There were no streaming analytics whispering which ideas tested well. There were just people in smoke-filled rooms saying, "You know what kids will love, a cube that talks," and someone else nodding and saying, "Make it happen." That's what made it beautiful. You can feel that boldness in every frame, every bad effect, every overacted line. Even the failures glow with it. Because for every moment that made you laugh, there was another that made you believe, even for just a second, that maybe, just maybe, the world could be that weird. But it wasn't just imagination running wild. It was a mirror. The 1980s were a decade obsessed with identity. The Cold War wasn't just about weapons, it was about image, about perception, about who controlled the story. Television, for the first time, was the world's storyteller, and so the weirdness of its shows reflected our contradictions. Manimal, a man who could turn into any animal, wasn't just silly. It was about adaptability, about becoming what the world needed you to be to survive. It came at a time when globalization and corporate evolution were forcing people to change faster than they could process. Ottoman wasn't just Tron for TV, it was our fascination with the digital frontier, the dream that computers could make us stronger, smarter, even heroic. Turbo Teen might look ridiculous now, but beneath the absurd premise was something deeper. The 1980s anxiety about machines merging with flesh, about what happens when technology stops serving us and starts becoming us. Even Rubik, the amazing cube, as chaotic and goofy as it seemed, had a subtext that feels oddly poignant now. The show took a global toy craze, an object designed for intellect, and gave it personality, humor, and compassion. It humanized logic. The cube wasn't just a puzzle, it was a metaphor for connection. A broken, scrambled thing that only worked when aligned, surrounded by family, community, and care. Doesn't that sound like every generation since? And Captain Power, maybe the strangest of them all, was a warning disguised as a toy commercial. A post-apocalyptic world where machines rule and humans fight for freedom. Broadcast during Saturday morning cartoon hours. Kids pointed toy guns at their TV screens while the show quietly told them about fascism, loss, and the cost of innovation. It's easy to laugh now, but that was a generation's first exposure to interactive media, and maybe, in its own clunky way, to empathy. It taught you that screens could respond, that stories could fight back. Then there was Pee-wee's Playhouse, the one show that didn't predict the future so much as create its own dimension. You didn't just watch it, you entered it. The colors, the sounds, the textures, it felt like television had swallowed an art gallery and decided to throw a dance party inside. It was joyful chaos, radical inclusivity, and creative rebellion all at once. Pee-wee's World told you that being different wasn't just okay, it was a superpower. Every puppet, every piece of talking furniture, every moral lesson wrapped in absurdity whispered a bigger truth. The world can be both kind and chaotic, and it's your job to dance through both. Small Wonder took that idea and put it in suburbia. A perfect American family, 2 cars, a lawn, and a secret. Their daughter was a robot. It's laughable now, sure, but think about what it meant back then. Artificial life hidden in plain sight. The dream of control, of creating the perfect child who never talks back, never grows old, never leaves. But deep down, that show was about loneliness, wasn't it? About the longing for connection in a world already outsourcing emotion to technology. Watching Vicky with her stiff movements and mechanical voice, you saw both the fantasy and the warning, a robot who could mimic love, but never feel it. Sound familiar? Shows like Street Hawk and The Highwayman carried that same energy into adult action fantasy. They were loud, fast, unapologetically over the top. They celebrated freedom, mobility, and individuality in a decade obsessed with independence. These weren't just car chases, they were visual poems about the American dream, revving down endless highways that always seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere at once. You watched them for the thrill, but you stayed for the feeling that the open road still meant something. That maybe, behind all the smoke and chrome, there was still a hero left to believe in. And then came Max Headroom. The glitch. The ghost in the machine. The 1980s answer to every question no one was ready to ask. Who controls information? Who decides what truth looks like? Who do we become when our faces live inside screens? Max was born as satire, but over time he became prophecy. His stuttering, pixelated grin wasn't just a gimmick. It was a reflection of the system breaking down. He was the first digital personality, the first influencer, the first AI to hold a mirror to humanity and say, "This is what you look like when you can't stop watching." It's poetic, really. The weirdest shows of the 1980s, dismissed, canceled, forgotten, ended up being the most accurate predictions of the world we live in now. What was once absurd is now everyday life. We talk to machines, we live through avatars, we interact with screens that fire back. The weird became the normal, and the normal became invisible. But maybe that's why revisiting these shows feels so powerful. They remind us of a time when weirdness still felt new, when the future was something you could imagine, not something you scrolled through, when entertainment didn't have to apologize for being different. Nostalgia is tricky. It doesn't just make you miss what was, it makes you ache for who you were, the you who believed in nonsense, the you who laughed at puppets and gasped at glowing cars, the you who didn't need irony to enjoy something impossible. That's the spell of 1980s television. It didn't just entertain, it built wonder into your wiring. It taught you to dream sideways. And maybe that's what we've lost in today's world of polished perfection. Everything now is designed for precision, measured, optimized, streamlined. But weirdness doesn't survive in perfection. It thrives in mess. The best ideas are the ones that don't quite fit, that stumble, that make you tilt your head and think, what on earth did I just watch? Those were the moments that made you feel alive. You can feel it when you rewatch them now. The camera grain, the clunky dialogue, the analog warmth that no HD restoration can replicate, the laughter that doesn't sound like it came from a studio. It came from the room, you, your friends, your parents half watching from the kitchen. It wasn't just content, it was a ritual, a shared experience that belonged to that specific moment in time. The weirdness of the 1980s wasn't a bug in the system, it was the system. A rebellion against boredom, against cynicism, against the idea that stories had to make sense to matter. And that's the heart of nostalgia. It's not just remembering what you loved, but remembering why you loved it. You loved it because it made you feel free. It made you believe that the world still had corners to explore, that heroes could ride motorcycles faster than sound, that puzzles could talk, that maybe, just maybe, your television wasn't just a box, it was a doorway. Here's the thing no one tells you, that feeling doesn't have to die. It doesn't have to live only in reruns or half-remembered theme songs. You can keep it alive by letting yourself enjoy things that don't make sense, by allowing imagination to exist without justification, by choosing wonder over irony, sincerity over coolness. Maybe the real lesson from all those bizarre, short-lived 1980s shows is this: it's okay to be ridiculous. It's okay to dream too big, to fail spectacularly, make something so strange that people talk about it 40 years later, not because it was good, but because it was alive. If you were there, you get it. And if you weren't, well, you can still feel it. The energy, the color, the heart that pulsed through every flickering frame. Because these shows were never just television. They were time capsules of human creativity at its most unfiltered. So the next time someone laughs at how absurd those old shows were, let them. Because weirdness ages better than logic. Weirdness sticks. Weirdness inspires. And someday, the things we call strange now will be the nostalgia someone else clings to. When you really think about it, maybe that's why we keep coming back, to remember what it felt like to be surprised, to remember when television wasn't afraid of being stupid, sincere, and beautiful all at once, to remember that imagination, even when ridiculous, is the purest thing we have left. So here's your invitation. Go watch one of them again. Manimal, Pee-wee, Max Headroom. Let them remind you that weird doesn't mean wrong, it means alive. And when the closing credits roll and that faint 1980s synth melody fades out, don't turn the lights on just yet. Sit there, let the glow wash over you one more time, because maybe in that soft electric hum you'll hear what television used to sound like when it still believed in magic. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to believe again too.